Yeah, I think the first concert I remember going to, of course, I think because this was the 70s, and if you remember it, you weren't there, they say. So, but I remember going to, at the Fillmore East in New York City, going to see Steppenwolf. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Jose Feliciano opened up for them, but I'm not 100% sure. I know I saw him at Fillmore East, and I think it was the same show, but I'm not sure. But Steppenwolf was definitely at the Fillmore East, the
Talk
first
about a
show.
crazy bill. Wow.
Really? Yeah. I graduated high school in 1971, and you know, the years of being in high school were the years, fortunately for me, that the Beatles were just blowing everybody's mind. And not just them, of course, but the Stones and, you know, the whole British invasion, the Kinks, who, you know, and the American artists, you know. I remember distinctly my sister Kay coming home from Columbus, Ohio, where she was living at the time, with the first Led Zeppelin album. And that was a mind-blowing album. So, you know, being in high school at a time when all this incredible music was coming out was, you know, I knew it back then. We all knew it back then. This is amazing music. This is totally revolutionary, you know. Yeah.
So, Matt, you are a well-known baker. You are a well-known wood carver, and two of your great carvings are right here next to you. When you walk through your restaurant, they're all over the place. But what role does music play in the creative process? You're one of the most creative, fun guys I know. I'm glad to call you my friend. But
Thank you, likewise.
Tell me about how music plays in that.
It's almost constantly playing music, whether it's listening to FUV or putting on my own tunes that are hit on shuffle, or sometimes I'll be interested, or sometimes I'll just want to hear a particular band or a particular album. But so I do mix it up. There's not really one thing that I do, but there's music on, I'd say, 98% of the time. And it's just, it's good because there's something about music that just makes everything better. And carving to music is just having two pleasures going on simultaneously that one doesn't take away from the other. Yeah, music plays a huge part of my life. It always has. I remember as a kid we used to sing Christmas carols, and I used to love to sing. And I used to love to listen to music all through my life, and it's carried on to this day, where music is endlessly enjoyable, and it soothes you when you need soothing. It makes you even feel better when you already feel good. It's hard to quantify or qualify how big of an influence it has. It's just that it's let's put it this way, it would be really, really tough to not have music in my life and in our lives. It would just be half of what it is.
Who is it?
I wouldn't say it was one person as much as my older sisters. A few of my older sisters, like my sister Kay, I mentioned, bringing home Led Zeppelin. My sister Dawn, my sister Regina was a huge Dylan fan. So there was a few sisters who were turning me on to great music. My father was an influence, but because I knew he loved music. He used to love to sing. He wasn't a trained singer, but he had a nice voice, and he used to love to sing. And I got my love of music, I think, mostly from my dad, and then again turned on to music by my sisters. Then, of course, later on in life, in my probably 35 or so years ago, maybe about 30 years ago, I started listening to WFUV. So, as far as musical influences in my life, Rita Houston has turned me on to more incredible music that I otherwise probably would not have heard of, or at least not as quickly. But Rita brought people up who were unknown and started playing them on the New York airwaves, and I was an avid fan and, you know, contributor to the station for years. Almost still, I almost listen to no other radio station. So, you know, Rita's influence and WFUV's influence on as a whole really over the last 30 years has influenced my taste in music, and I attribute them to turning me on to great new music and still staying in touch with the great old stuff that's been around for 50 years. Rita and I had the opportunity to go to at least a half a dozen Dylan shows together. We both, you know, huge Dylan fans, so, you know, all of those were amazing. I went to Bonnaroo with Rita and Laura, and, you know, we had a freaking awesome time there. Yeah, so.
Bonnaroo!
Yeah. It was a great time. Well, first and foremost, and this is, for me, unequivocal, the Beatles. I mean, to me, the Beatles were just so completely different that they, to me, are set aside as the pinnacle. Of course, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Dire Straits. Is that 5 yet? You know, it's hard to narrow it down to 5, as you say, but I also had in my notes Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You know, if I could consider the Traveling Wilburys as a band, then they might even be number 2. Because those 2 albums by the Traveling Wilburys will forever be among my top 3 albums of all time. Yep. Yeah, my first car was a maroon Volkswagen Beetle, you know, rusted out floors and, you know, whatever kind of radio. So, you know, when I think of my first car, it had the just most rudimentary sound system, of course, but what was on the radio was, you know, good FM radio at that time. FM radio was great place to listen to all that kind of music that was being made, and you know, so that's what I cruised around to in my little Volkswagen Beetle. Well, I'll answer it this way. My first favorite album of Dylan that I really wore out was Nashville Skyline. Still to this day holds up as an incredible album. And then shortly after that, New Morning came out, and both of those I wore out, you know. But then years later, of course, Blood on the Tracks came out, and I would have to say, if I were pressed, probably Blood on the Tracks would be my number 1 Dylan album. Nyack has had a vibrant music scene for many years. When I first was hanging around Nyack, there used to be a place called The Office, owned by a friend of mine named Jackie DiPietro. His father owned it before he did. But when Jackie took it over, he was a musician, a percussionist, and big jazz fan, and it became very, very well known for being a very small club that had amazing, you know, musicians there. Stan Getz for one, Bill Evans another, multiple others I can't even remember right now. But The Office, you know, was back then a very, very well-known place. My friend Marianne Olive has olives here in Nyack, and that's been around for over 40 years, you know, probably getting close to 50 years that's been here. And she has been, you know, a person who has brought music to Nyack consistently over all these years. You know, Marianne's been around for years. There's a place in Nyack called Maureen's that's newer, that's been here for, I'd say, at least 3 years. And that's been a great venue. People talk about it all the time to me here at the restaurant. And I play the music that I like, and other people tend to like it too. So, you know, over the years, the way we deliver the music has changed drastically. When we first opened up, that was when CDs hadn't been around for too long, but that's how we first started delivering music to the dining room and bar. So we would have a 5 CD disc changer, you know, and hit shuffle. And, you know, we had a CD rack behind the bar. The CDs got trashed, of course. But over the years, as technology has grown, of course now it's a completely different animal. You plug in your phone, you go to Spotify or one of the other apps that are available, and you put in an artist's name and let them run with it. And it's kind of funny now because people come up to us and say, "Oh man, your soundtrack is great. Who's responsible for that soundtrack?" You know, and we say, "Oh, the bartender, Brian. He's got great taste in music." But you know, in truth, he put in one artist. And thanks, Spotify.
Thanks, Tom.